The founders were students of Scripture, and they understood we were created by God, and they also understood that we are made in His image. And that's a profound thing, because what that means is every single person has inestimable dignity and value. And your value is not related in any way to the color of your skin, what zip code you live in, what your talents are. It's all irrelevant. Your value is inherent, because it is given to you by your Creator. No one can take that away. There's a lot of other implications that come from this as well. The founders being students of Scripture, they also understood that man is fallen. I mean, that's the story of Scripture, that man has a fallen nature. And they understood that fallen men with power can become a problem, because power corrupts, and as Lord Acton acknowledged, absolute power corrupts absolutely. So they built in, when they set up this new nation, they had the Declaration of Independence, they had a blank slate upon which to paint, and they created a nation based upon these very important biblical principles. They built in a system of checks and balances and a separation of powers. Why? Because they knew that men are fallen by nature, and that we had to have these systems and checks and balances, and that God had ordained civil government so that we could order our affairs, because God knows that we're fallen creatures and that we had to do it this way. So they built all these great safeguards in, and then the founders articulated this to the people. Now, nobody talks about like this anymore except the Speaker of the House, but in the old days they used to. George Washington, in his famous farewell address, the father of our country, he concluded one of the most conclusory statements in the whole address. He said, "Of all the dispositions and habits which lead to political prosperity, religion and morality are indispensable sports." And John Adams, yeah, that's right. And then John Adams, our second president, he comes next. He said, "Our Constitution is made only for a moral and religious people." So the people had to have a high regard for the responsibility they have before their Creator. They had to know that they owe something to a power higher than the civil authorities, but to God Himself. And that's what would keep men honest and moral, the checks and balances, the separation of powers, but also the acknowledgement that they owed a higher duty, a higher calling to the one who gave us our rights, and that they have to be exercised responsibly. Because in recent years, we have lost a lot of the shine from the shining city on a hill. We have lost some of the things because we are losing sight of these basic foundational truths, our Judeo-Christian heritage that made us truly the greatest nation. There's a reason that America has been great, and it has been imperiled because people are forgetting. Without a vision, the people perish, and my people perish for lack of knowledge. God tells us in Scripture to remember these things, right? So I go back to the whiteboard and I tell the students, I say, wait a minute, you have lived in the greatest nation, but that is not assured to be true tomorrow and in the days ahead. Why? Because something has been happening in the current generation. Starting back in the late 1960s, early 1970s, where there's a long history of how we got here, but basically we have moved away from the founding principles and truths. We have forgotten them. In fact, some have openly mocked them. If you deny the Creator, which many in your generation do, if you deny that God made you in His image and that He is the one that gives you your rights, that leads to all sorts of chaos. Because here's what happens. You know that whole thing about how you're made in His image and you have inestimable dignity and value? That doesn't count anymore. See, that doesn't apply. You don't have any value that anybody gives you. You're just another member of the herd. You're just an accident. And if it's just the people, really you're just another social animal, right? And you know what social animals need? They have to be controlled and directed by the people who gain the power. See, and the power corrupts and it leads right back to tyranny. But by the way, kids, what the basis is, that whole thing about you being a social animal, the basis of that is socialism and communism. See, these are Marxist ideas. Marxism believes with the premise that there is no God, right? And that has led to all sorts of calamity around the globe and the murder of tens of millions of innocent people just in the 20th century alone. That is the opposite of the truth. That is the opposite of the founding principles of your great nation. And I tell the young people, you have a duty and an obligation to not just understand these principles, but to defend them and to acknowledge your Creator who gave you those rights and the responsibility to be good citizens and to stand for what is good and right, to walk humbly before your Creator, to love mercy and act justly and do all the things that Scripture acknowledges and admonishes you to do. And if you don't do it, there is no guarantee that you get to maintain your freedom or that this grand experiment in self-governance will last longer than almost 250 years. But, well, that's right.